Let me share with you our story. If everything's correct, you can see the slides right now. I will be talking a little bit about the following things. So if you think about the outline of my presentation, it will be about our journey, just briefly, just to give you some context of where we came from, like that summit 6 years ago. I'm going to talk a little bit about continuous employee listening, the framework we're using, about measuring the voice of the employee, which is a little bit more technical part in the presentation about topic detection and text mining. So I hope you don't drop out during the mid-session of my presentation. Then I'm going to talk about visualizing the voice of the employee and how we share it in the organization. So my presentation is not so much COVID crisis related, if you will, but I'm happy to talk about in the Q&A at the end about the measurements we're taking from a people analytics perspective related to COVID. I'm more than happy to share as well. But I think the continuous listening framework we already implemented in the last year is actually helping us to deal with COVID in a much more quicker way than before. So let's dive into the presentation. First, our journey. Like mentioned already a few times, we started in 2014. We started looking at sales, profit, new customers, so real business outcomes. It was a deliberate decision of us to immediately look at decision outcomes instead of maybe more HR-related topics like absenteeism, which is also here, by the way, or engagement, because we wanted to make clear as soon as possible what people analytics can do for our business. We were only with 2 FTE, 2 people, and we were positioned within shared services. 2 years ahead in time, of course, we still have people analytics, which for us means applying advanced analytics on combined data sets and making sense of the data and supporting decision making in the organization, not only HR, but also business. But in 2016, we developed a new service, if you will, which is more related to the strategic workforce management. And on COVID, we're doing really different things than a few months ago, by the way, but maybe we can talk about it later. 5 FTE and positioned somewhere else in the organization. 2018, survey management was an extra service. We inherited the annual engagement survey, but since that period, we introduced a lot of pull surveys. We combined transactional data with survey data, and the team grew to 10 FTE, and we are positioned within strategy and analytics, which I personally like a lot because it's not per se the best way, but I like the fact that analytics is actually, in our case, investigating strategic opportunities or strategic problems. So I like the joint between our strategy team and the analytics team. And if you arrive at 2020, we're also working more closer and closer to management information and dashboards. Something, by the way, we deliberately in the beginning of our journey didn't include in our people analytics practice because we didn't want to be bothered too much about comparing lists with finance or other staff departments within the company about what report is the right one. We wanted to really accelerate on our ability to do advanced analytics. But I think now it's more appropriate to start talking about how can we also support management information and dashboards for HR and the organization. And if you bring that all together, it's 13 FTE and still within strategy and analytics. And if you look at the topics, I guess they're not per se different than other companies who do people analytics or strategic workforce management. But as we move along, we shifted a little bit to leadership, engagement, ROI on learning, skill gap. Closing the skill gap is a big topic still. We're doing a lot of skill matching exercises, and we're looking now with our surveys, for instance, to people thinking and what do people need on remote working and how should their workplace look like, and of course, what is their sentiment in COVID-19 period. So this is a little bit a quick overview. I do realize it's quick, but just to give you a context where we're coming from. And this presentation is going to deal much more on the employee experience part, how we measure it, how we visualize it, and how we share it in the organization. So I think a year and a half ago, our CHRO came up to me and said, okay, we're talking about employee experience now for already maybe half a year, but can you help us to articulate it a little bit better and to start measuring it? Which is, of course, a perfect question to ask my team. And then we started talking to a lot of people in the company, outside the company. And depending on who you talk to, employee experience can mean so many things. People can talk about high and low mapping in processes. It can be facility related, moments that matter, touch points, all characteristics or words that belong to employee experience. And it was, to be honest, also a little bit confusing because what is it really, employee experience? And there are, by the way, some great frameworks out there. TI People from Volker, Jacob Morgan, Kennedy Fitch, they all have different frameworks to measure your whole employee cycle and the different touch points and moments that matter. But we took a different approach. We thought, well, let's just, if we want to do continuous listening, let's first ask the question to our employee, how are you feeling? What is on top of your mind? And from there, we are deep diving and looking for specific moments that matters, high and low mapping on specific topics. But I will talk more on that later in this presentation. So we started actually with a maybe very simplistic view on employee experience. We wanted to capture the voice of the employee, of course, and we wanted to do it more continuously. Now let me elaborate on that. This is kind of our framework. Like I said earlier, if you want to do continuous employee listening, start listening. And I will share in a minute in what ways we are doing that. Very important is the middle part, is love the problem. I think much too often, based on surveys or other data, organizations jump to conclusions and bringing an app or other solutions. Artificial intelligence is mentioned almost instantly as a way of introducing solutions. And I think not too often is there enough dedication and time involved in really understanding what's being said. Because although I'm going to talk about what cool stuff we're doing on topic detection and text analytics, it's only signaling out what people talk about. So it's bringing you to the right questions, but not the right solutions. You still have to do a lot of analytics, service design, interviews to really understand what's behind it. So I want to stress that loving the problem is very important. And then, of course, once you know what the problem is, in the best possible way you can, try a solution. Let's go through these 3 stages and look at how we are doing it. So start listening. We do multiple things. You see our employee experience survey, which is a monthly 10% sample of our organization. It's very simple and it is based on open questions. First of all, sampling is very important to us. We have many different surveys in our organization, not only from HR, but also from facility, communication, strategy. We're all bombarding our employees with survey questions. So we strongly believe that using stratified sampling, making sure your sample is representative for the scope you want to look at in your organization, is a great way to avoid survey fatigue in your organization. What we actually see when we monitor responses, and we have some numerical scores to track and trace, we see that after 20% no, I have to say 10-15% of our sample, the scores start to stabilize already. So sampling works. You don't need to do full surveys all the time. Simple and open questions is, of course, also important. Besides the fact that you don't want to ask questions all the time, you want to ask questions in a very simple way. And our experience is that open questions, not too many of them, but maybe 2 or 3 sometimes, really help you grab the context of what people are thinking in a much better way than all the closed questionnaire. And it opens up the opportunity of employees to talk about things that we as an organization, as a people analytics department, didn't think of. So open questions is for us an excellent tool, if you will, to better understand what employees are thinking. The consequence of that is that we need to step up in maturity and topic and text analytics. And we got some help from Andrew Merritt in the beginning, Workometrics. And from there, we developed all the things ourselves. But it's really helpful, and I hope to prove that in the next of the presentation. So employee experience, a monthly survey is kind of the core of our survey calendar. But it's not the only one. We still have our employee engagement annual survey. Partly also because there are a lot of still some KPIs on there for senior management or departments to look at. It's still a 70-item closed questionnaire. But the tool we're using by Willis Towers Watson allows an employee to fill this survey in pretty quickly, actually. I think it only takes 6 or 7 minutes and then you're done because of the interface. And it provides a lot of information as well. And we still have that annual survey because on a team level, we still have the team dialogue based on the engagement survey. For employee experience with sampling, you don't have enough data to ensure that everybody can have a team dialogue, right? Then we have pull surveys. It can be a custom questionnaire on benefits, on how people perceive the strategy of the organization. It can be pull surveys on high and low mapping within processes or HR services. On top of that, we have an employee community where we have some volunteers, like 700, 800 volunteers, who we can ask questions, do A/B testing, have a discussion with. So it's a little bit more qualitative instead of quantitative, but it's a nice add-on with the whole survey calendar. And last but not least, besides the survey data and the community data, we of course have transactional data. What questions do people ask when they call our HR contact center? What benefits are they actually using? I mean, there's lots of transactional data that is, in a way, also listening to your employees. People can say they like specific benefits, but if they never use it, it is valid and very important extra information. So my point here is, most organizations already have a few of these in place. Maybe not all of them, or maybe more, I don't know. But you can start tomorrow if you have a survey, if you have some transactional data, to start processing that data and to have a better understanding what your people think. Okay? Next phase, as promised, is love the problem. This is more traditionally maybe where the people analytics period comes in, or the people analytics comes in. And what we're doing is collecting, of course, the data which I explained in the previous slide, transactional and survey data. We're not only collecting it, we have to connect it, we have to clean it, and a lot of time goes into this phase or activity, if you will. We're still doing a lot of descriptive analysis, look at historical trends, ratios, we do some simple correlation or ANOVA tests, maybe some visualization and dashboarding just to have an understanding with the experts in the business on what are we looking at. And then the advanced analytics or predictive analytics, we're using modeling like regression clustering, decision tree, or one of the other examples which are out there. And text analytics is going to be the example of the presentation today. Last but not least here is service design. So the top 3 is maybe more about data collection and data modeling and data handling. But service design is more about the double diamond approach. You look at your problem and then you look at your solution. You do interviews, you do paneling, maybe include some high and low mapping, do some extra surveys or research if needed to really understand what's beneath the data. Again, analytics is signaling out what people are thinking about, but in many cases it doesn't provide the solution. So you need something else, like service design in our case, to go a little bit deeper. Last phase is then try a solution. You don't know upfront, so I will talk at the end of the presentation a little bit how the rhythm or the phasing gives you a feedback loop on does your solution really work. But it is important to just try sometimes. You never know. If you did your homework well, you know during the problem-solving phase, pretty much as good as possible, what the problem is. And then you can design your solution. So if an onboarding app is helping you to tackle a problem, if a benefit snapshot is providing more information to your employees because they ask it, it's all very useful. The examples on your right are examples that we already implemented. But to be honest, some of them are a little bit older, like the lockdown, for instance. It's, by the way, a great augmented escape room, the world first, as it says. But now these days, we're going to design solutions that are more driven by the data of the employees. In the phase we implemented these solutions, we didn't have all the data I was talking about on the previous slide. So more and more, we want to tune our solutions on what people are really talking about. So I hope this is a little bit clear. It's maybe a little bit fast, but we have the 3 maybe simple steps, but there's a lot of work behind that to understand the employee, to really understand the problem that is behind the voice of the employee, and to come up with the right solution. All right. I'm going to check the time in between. Let's go to measuring the voice of the employee. And this is going to be a little bit technical, so don't run away. Just stay. There's some cool animations in there, I hope. But what do we do? The core of our employee experience survey are these 3 questions. Not the only questions, but the main questions. So how likely are you to recommend ABN-AMRO as a good employer, a numerical score, and then the open questions pop up. What is ABN-AMRO doing well, and what could ABN-AMRO do better? And we do that consistently already for a year now, more than a year. And let's focus on this tip question. We have the top and the tip. What could ABN-AMRO do better as an employer? Well, what can happen is that a person types in this information. My manager does not listen to my ideas. I cannot do the training I want. Would like to have more diversity in senior management. I have poor development opportunities. Workload is not okay. This is a lot of information. And you actually want to capture everything this employee is telling you. So not only the first, or not arbitrarily pick one of the sentences in this comment. So what we had to do first, technically, is split all those comments. So we had to split them, in this case, 5 sources of information, which we were going to compare in the model and to see if there is a topic behind it. But this is not everything we did. Splitting is very important because you don't want to lose all the information people are sharing with you. But you also want to transform the comments into something that the algorithms better understand. So we transformed everything that's uppercase to lowercase. We transformed everything that's plural to singular, and we did some label abbreviations. Because a computer really thinks that manager with a capital and without capital are two different words. That can be the case. So to avoid these problems, this is also a technical transformation we did on all the comments. So first split, and then some transformation to make it easier for the computer to understand. Okay. Once we've done that, all the transformation, we started building a what we call training data set. It's on your upper left. And we did this in a kind of what's called a supervised way. So you see some examples. My manager never listens. My manager is not interested in me. And a little bit with the help of algorithms, but also with a lot of reading ourselves, we classified those sentences and labeled it as, for instance, manager quality. But we had to do a lot of reading ourselves in the beginning. And I would really recommend you to do the same, because it actually really improves your precision rate in the end of your prediction and your model. By the way, you can also read more on this in my latest LinkedIn article if you want to recap everything. But then, once we have that training data set, let's assume new data comes in on the right. We call that a test data set. So my manager does not listen to me, which is similar maybe to the sentences on the left, but not exactly the same. So how does the computer actually know that these sentences are similar to each other or not? And unfortunately, or I don't know if it's unfortunately, the computer is better in numbers than in. So what we did is we translated all the sentences with two routines. One is called word2vec and one is TF-IDF. I'm not going to go in the technicalities of it, but it means that the sentence "my manager never listens" was translated in a word2vector, so translated to numbers, and TF-IDF is sort of a word count. It counts if words appear or not in the sentence, but it's also represented it in a numerical code. And we do that for the training set and the test data set. And then it's easier for the algorithm to compare and to find the best match. And in our case, the support vector machine linear model or algorithm gave us the best precision rate, if you will. So we have, I think, 150 different topics. And the 80% precision rate means that a sentence is placed with an 80% precision in the right topic, one of those 150. So analytical wise, that's pretty good. But it still means 1 out of 5 is wrongly labeled. So we're constantly trying to boost the precision rate and to have a better performance. But for us, this is, maybe it sounds complicated if you're not familiar with topic detection, but this is pretty doable, if definitely if you have some help. But it really helps you to process all the data that people provide you, all the comments that they provide you, and to make sense of it in a quicker way. So this is a little bit the technical background of what we're doing within topic detection or text analytics. But then we had the challenge, okay, but how are we going to visualize the outcomes back to the organization? How are we going to talk to our senior management? How are we going to talk to our experts in HR or in IT or in facility about what we're learning from our employees? And what are we doing to provide information back to the employees themselves? And to do that, we thought of a visual, maybe not the only visual, well, definitely not the only visual, but a visual that, in our case, worked pretty well. And let me talk you through that. We call it the introduction of the bubble chart with a nice champagne glass. So, the bubble chart. Every bubble in our dashboard, and I'm going to show you a screenshot later on, but every bubble represents a topic. And on my example, a few slides back, we talked about the manager quality. So in that topic, a lot of comments are hidden behind the topic manager quality. And the other topics could be learning and development, vision and strategy, workload, or whatever. And we present all the topics in our dashboard on 2 axes. So the horizontal axis in white, I'm not sure if you can see that very well, but the horizontal axis represents the recommendation score. If you remember, we also ask a numerical score. How do you recommend ABN AMRO as an employer? And that score is kind of correlated to all the people who provide us with a comment on manager quality. So if manager quality moves to the right in the dashboard, it actually means that the group of people talking about manager quality have also a higher recommendation score for ABN AMRO. So it's not a statistical correlation, but it's maybe, I don't know, a visual correlation that's represented in this diagram. The vertical axis. It represents the number of tops minus the number of tips. So it's a netto score, and I have to explain. People can say that in terms of manager quality, a lot of stuff is going well. We call that a top. And we count the number of tops, comments that are positive in manager quality. We also count the number of tips people give about manager quality, and we subtract them from each other. So we get a netto score. So if the manager quality bubble moves up, it means more people are giving compliments on this topic than complaints or suggestions. Still pretty simple, I hope. Then the size of the bubble simply represents the total number of comments, either being a top or a tip. So if it inflates, it means more people are talking about this specific topic. Right. And here you see a screenshot of the real dashboard. I wasn't courage enough to give you a live demonstration because of the technique. I'm always afraid of a technique that's not working, but this is a good visualization. On the top left, you see the bubble chart. What you can do is you can select a business line, which is very relevant if we go to an Exco -1 management team to discuss what their people are talking about, to be able to deep dive, of course, via your organization structure. We can also choose to look at these bubble charts on a level. So let's say, what are data scientists telling us? What do they like? What are they talking about? Which is also very valuable because it can help you with the whole employee cycle for data scientists. Branding, recruitment, and also retention and development in the middle. So the dashboard is flexible in terms of views, how you want to look at your bubble chart. The other screenshots are just an example of deep dive pages where you can look at a specific topic. You can look which Hay group or level or geographical location or gender or other demographics. So it's more of a slice and dice ability in the dashboard. Bottom right is more a visualization of the geographical part. And maybe interesting to see, I'm not sure if I can use my cursor to point it out, but it's on the top right, you see the line graph, which moves up actually in March. So the recommendation score, maybe not surprisingly, I don't know, moved up significantly in March, and it was the first 3 weeks of social distancing and being in the COVID crisis. So we're still looking at why this is happening, but a good hypothesis can be that people are pretty satisfied with ABN AMRO, in our case, how they react, how quick they reacted to the COVID-19 crisis. That's what we see in the first comments popping up from the survey. All right, moving on. I see that I go a little bit quickly, but then we have more time maybe to do Q&A. Sharing the employee voice. I think a few concepts are still important here. Maybe what are we doing with all the data? So I guess the first thing you do, if you want to understand what people talk about, is do the topic detection I talked about during this presentation. And again, some of the routines and algorithms are on the outer side of this, this pie chart. But this is the first thing you want to do. What do people talk about? Then another thing you can do is look at topic impact. And we're doing our first analysis here. So it doesn't really matter if people complain, for instance, about onboarding or training and development related to their impact on employee experience or even business outcomes like sales or client satisfaction. And I think it's very interesting to see which topics really have impact on business outcomes that as an organization or employees you think are very important. And the techniques you're using for that is actually the advanced analytics. Some examples are multi-level and regression, but it's very important to find out which topics within all the information we have are more relevant in impacting business outcomes. So that's the next thing you can do with this data. Then, of course, with service design, you can talk and think about topic interventions. So what are the best interventions? Looking at all the data and interviewing people, what are the best interventions to put in place and to implement? What we can do is look at impact interventions. So with treatment groups and a non-treatment group, if some people are subject to an intervention and other people are not, are maybe scores on high and low mapping that we did in phase 3, are they really improving or not? Or are they lacking behind? So we can use that information to tweak the intervention. And in the end, of course, you look at your topic trend. So is a topic moving in the dashboard I just explained? Is it moving to the left or to the right? Or is it disappearing over time? Or is the bubble growing? And that's maybe not a statistical check, but at least a check from a signaling point of view if people stop talking about specific topics. So this is kind of the logic from an analytical perspective that we apply to looking at all this issue. This is already my last slide. Sorry, David, I'm a little bit quick, but we can take a little bit more time on Q&A. What are we doing to share all this information in the organization? And let me bring up the slide. We're sharing this, like I said earlier, with employees, with process owners, with senior management. And we share it, of course, with employees because we want to motivate them to find solutions. We want to give back what they are sharing with us. And we also think that if we don't do it, they won't participate maybe in future surveys. So we also share with them to make sure they stay attached and stay aligned and feel motivated to participate in future surveys. And we do that on a quarterly basis in terms of sharing the insights. And of course, on a monthly basis, we're asking them questions via the sampling methodology. And of course, we share with process owners. We have a community which is broader than HR. If you talk about process owners, you see it under the word process owner. You see HR, FM is facility management, communications, IT. We sit down together with all of them because we indeed don't think that employee experience is an HR thing for itself. We are organized in I think Al called it a task force. We call it a circle, the rec circle. So there are representatives on management level from HR, FM, comms, etc. And we share data sources. We share survey calendar. We see where we can join the different surveys we have or integrate them together. And based on all the information that is processed, we kind of shape the future of how we work together. So it's definitely not only HR, but it's a joint effort. And process owners, being in HR, facility comms, or whatever discipline, well, they can use all the information we have to prioritize and to evaluate. Are you still doing the right interventions? Or can you improve your interventions? Or can you improve your client satisfaction? And they can all use the dashboard I showed you themselves. So they can go in there and look on a monthly basis if there's new information and how topics move along the diagram. And of course, senior management. In the last, I think, 4 months, we went to all the Exco -1 business management teams together with our HR business colleagues and together with our employee experience colleagues within HR to share what we're seeing, to share what we're learning. And it helps them a little bit to, well, of course, understand what people talk about, but also to evaluate and prioritize maybe more from a strategic point of view what we are doing. So all three are very important. If you don't give back what you're hearing and learning, well, the initiative will die very quickly, to my opinion. All right. So like David said, maybe in introduction, we also share a lot on LinkedIn, on Twitter, also on Flipboard. That's the logo in the middle. It's also a cool app you can download. Feel free to contact me if you want to know more after reading the LinkedIn posts. I'm happy to share with other companies. If you are embarking on people analytics or you're a little bit further in the curve, I'm more than happy to share because it's also always very good for us to learn from others as well. So thank you for listening to the presentation and staying tuned, although it was maybe a little bit more technical, I'm not sure. And I'm going to give back to David for Q&A.
Patrick, firstly, thank you very much. It was a really clear description and story, and it wasn't too technical because I understood it. So if that helps. We have several questions, and I knew as soon as you said stratified sampling, we might get a question on it. So Tom has asked, what sampling methods do you use with surveying? You mentioned 10 to 15%. What number does this correspond to? So I think that's the percentage of the workforce that you sample, and I know you do it for 10 months over the year, don't you? Because there's 2 months in the year you don't do the sampling, so the pulse. So I'll let you explain.
Well, we do it every month, by the way. Only in the month where we do the annual survey, we include it in the engagement survey. So we're not going to send separate surveys. We're including it in the big one. And the 10%, the 10-15%, and you can do some calculations, is 10 or 15% of the whole workforce indeed. Because that's enough to have your intervals of, how you call it, insecurity. It's not the right word I'm looking for, but there are some that you can calculate. Is it still representative for the whole workforce? If you want to talk about impact on business levels, your sample needs to go up. You need to have a bigger sample. So this is something we constantly look at. And stratify just means that you take some characteristics, you take into account some characteristics when you make the sample. Because let's say you want a good spread over the different business lines. You want a good spread in gender, a good spread in age. You can use that to build your samples.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. We've got quite a few questions, so we'll try and rapid fire through them. I'm just going to select the ones that have been thumbed up the most. So this is from an anonymous question. How do you evaluate topics' relevance to business metrics? So I guess that's the top and the tip and the size of the bubbles. How do you then link that to the business metrics within the bank?
Okay. From a technical point of view, then, if an employee gives you talks about different topics, you can use that data and write it back to your data set. So at the end, you know, on an individual level, anonymously, but on an individual level, what people are talking about. So what topics do they talk about? And we also have data anonymously on individual level and sometimes team level, how, for instance, people score on client satisfaction or sales or profit, or if they're sick or not, like absenteeism. As long as you do that in an anonymously way and GDPR proof, we are allowed to do that research. And then you can create models that say, okay, topic A, B, C, or D is more impactful. Correlated is not the right word because it's confusing in statistics, but most impactful on net promoter score. And that's really valuable because then you're not only listening to your employees, but you're always also trying to find an optimum in employee experience for your organization. Because without looking at your organization goals and increasing employee experience by itself is actually pretty easy. You can give your employees everything they want, but that's of course not possible. It still has to be looked at within the context of your organization. Is that answering the question?
It does to me. I'll let the person that asked the question comment if it hasn't, but it certainly does to me. The next question is from Robert Cruzel of Uber, who is, like you, based in Amsterdam, Patrick. He said, did you face any significant challenges within HR to explain the technique and techniques that you're using and get buy-in from it to drive useful solutions? So, I mean, have you actually had to explain in detail how the techniques are working, or do people see the results? Because obviously you're empowering people in facilities in IT to take action on the insights that you find.
I think it varies a little bit. Even on senior management level, sometimes you bump into people who really are interested in the techniques behind it. So we always have a slide in our presentation somewhere where we elaborate on the methodology. It's always in the pack, maybe in the appendix, but it's there, and we can talk about it if people want to hear more about it. And sometimes that happens on all levels, by the way. But in many other cases, maybe also because people know the department, know what we do normally with other modeling and people analytics. They trust us, and they are captured by the visualization and the conversation, and it's less about the technique. But it definitely happens that we have to explain it. But it's not been a big problem, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Another question. You're definitely generating a lot of questions for this presentation. So this is from Nick Garbis, now at One Model. How far into solution and design and implementation does your team go, Patrick? And I know that you work very closely with Luke and the employee experience team here as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's actually something we're still trying to figure out ourselves, to be honest. But we are heavily involved in the service design. But the team of Luke Sombeski is in the lead to design and do the service design projects. But there are certain steps and things we can do by supporting service design. Like I said in the presentation, we sometimes do extra analytics that can be used in the double diamond methodology as well. Measuring high and low mapping is something we can support from our department as well. So we are definitely involved, but at the same hand, to be honest, we're still figuring out if there is a specific standard procedure where and when people analytics should be involved in service design. And to my opinion, it's pretty custom made for every service design process. I think what we always can do is do modeling, but that's always specific on the topic. We can do an extra survey, but that's also depending on the topic. What questions do you use, etc. We can do high and low mapping. So the techniques we're going to use within service design are, I guess, standard, but you always have to talk about and think about how you design those things. So we are definitely involved, and it helps that Luc and his team are literally, well, not today, but literally here on the same floor. And by the way, the only one floor here at head office.
All right, okay. Because you live so close, as I know, Patrick. So very quick question. We're coming to the end of time. Hopefully we'll get two more in. There's two kind of around timing. So how long does it take from getting the results of the survey in to doing all the topic detection and analysis and getting those into the bubble chart? Typically, how long does that take?
Well, once the survey is closing, it takes, I guess, a day, maybe 2 days. So it's all scripted. In the beginning, it took a little bit longer, of course, specifically when we did it a little bit more in a supervised way. But now we are able to, well, I guess within 2 days to bring it into the dashboard where people can look at it and see if they get some valuable insights from it.
Great. And I'm going to ask the last question. We've got a minute,
Sure.
And it's going to be, you've been on the journey for 6 or 7 years. With what you know now, what is the one thing that you would do differently if you were starting again?
Excellent question. Ah, boy, that's a difficult one. I think the notion that survey management, we onboarded that only after 3 or 4 years in our journey. If I tomorrow would start my job somewhere else, I would immediately include survey management. It's a valuable source of collecting data and improving actually your models because you have extra data. So combining the transactional world and the survey world from day one is definitely something I would do. That pops up in my mind now. Maybe tomorrow I have another one, but this is my answer for now.
Great answer, Patrick. We've used our time. It's fascinating as ever, and again, it's a real privilege to see the journey that you've been on and the real value that you're adding now at all levels of the organization with that. Thank you very much indeed.